Rolling. Welcome everyone to the Stockbridge Library's online poetry series. We are in year 3 and our theme this year is inquiry and the power of poetry in asking and answering questions. This series was started and is stewarded by John Gillespie, who was 3 years ago the president of the board of the Stockbridge Library, and now he continues to be involved from far away in Maine and keep us connected to poetry each week. John, thank you. I'd also like to thank Rabbi Alexander Lazarus Klein for joining us today. Rabbi Lazarus Klein will be sharing his work with us and be in conversation with John Gillespie. Just a few quick words about our poet today. Alex came to Buffalo, where he is joining us from today, in the fall of 2008 to serve as the rabbi of Temple Sinai, now called Congregation Shir Shalom. He brings warmth, creativity, and compassion to the role of synagogue rabbi. He is a 2004 graduate of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, and he holds a master's and bachelor's degree from the Jewish Theological Seminary, as well as if that wasn't enough, a bachelor's degree in creative writing from Columbia University. Oh, well, wait a second. It does say here, Rabbi Klein, that you currently reside in Amherst. He has 3 books of poetry, Looking Out an Airplane Window, poetry written while walking dogs, and Wildflowers and Fireflies. Thank you, Alex, for joining us. I'll turn the program over to you and to John.
Great. Now, Wendy, thank you again in the library for hosting our weekly program. Alex, you're reader number 99.
Wow.
99 bottles of poetry on the wall, 99 bottles of it. No. Yeah. No, it's yeah. When we started in April of 2020, I thought we were going to do four programs, and it just started a life of its own. And now it's this with all the orchestrations to make it happen. I just get so buzzed by this time every week. It's as I say it, recharging into the poetry wall. That's how it works. So tell me what does inquiry mean to you?
Well, I love this topic this year because inquiry is really probably at the center of what I think of my poetry. Usually a poem will start with a question. Why is this that way? Why is that that way? Why is this little detail? I feel like poetry is a wonderful avenue for exploring things. And it's so important to try to, figure it out. That's sort of what the poem is from the beginning to end, is a journey of discovery, starting usually with some type of question and then going through it until you have at least some form of an answer.
So, you're talking about a question. So those questions, I always think it's good to understand the creative process. So, do those questions kind of arrive for you and then they kind of birth themselves into poems? How does the whole, sometimes a poem starts, and we've heard people, a question arrives in the middle of a poem. And then other people, some question starts to germinate, and then it turns itself into a poem. How does that work for you?
Well, it's funny. One of our poets here, Gunilla Theander Kester, who unfortunately is away for her father's funeral in Sweden, she said that for her writing is more like a kind of struggling with the words, like going to war with her poetry. She said, but for you, Rabbi Alex, she said, yours is about discovering the wonder. I think most of the poems that I write are kind of when I'm out and I just notice things. I write a lot when I'm traveling, for example. I feel like those are moments where you really notice the discrepancies between what you're used to and what's different in this world and where things really pop out. COVID, and I'll be reading some poetry that I wrote during COVID. It was really just, wow, what has happened to the world? How do we adjust to this? So I definitely think usually how I write in anything, it starts with something that, wow, that's really interesting, or that's something I just don't understand very well. And I use the poetry as an avenue for me. It's always been helpful to me since I was a child, actually, to really just explore the world.
So the time of being interested and curious, and the time where, who knows, pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, how long does that usually happen pretty quickly, or do those observations kind of, play around in your head for a while?
So sometimes they play around in my head, excuse me. But normally I make an observation. Probably I have my cell phone with me and I write down some notes, and then I feel like that could be a poem. And sometimes it'll take different tries at it. But usually I feel like for me, in the way that I write, it's just the freshness of just composing it. Usually that works the best for me. I know other people approach poetry very differently, but yeah, I think for me, it's really in that moment. It might not take very long to write a poem.
Yeah. And as I said before people came on, you kind of have a dual personality, poet and rabbi. We've had poets and artists, we've had poets, and I don't know, we've had a bunch of other people that have kind of, had two sides to the coin. So how does inquiry, once again, you don't have to go in for a long time, but how is that part of, maybe your sermons or your preaching? How does inquiry, once again, I'm just always intrigued by how this gets worked into the conversation.
Well, inquiry is essential to Judaism. There's a Hebrew word or Aramaic word called kashi or kushia, which is a challenge. I like to describe it as, in the paper, they have what's different about these two different pictures.
Yeah.
And that is the way that we approach things. For example, on Passover, the whole idea is we're going to have a very different type of meal that we call a Seder meal, so that it forces everyone at the table to ask questions. The idea in terms of an educational philosophy is that, questions are what really allows us to examine things. So I'd say, yeah, I mean, whether it's a sermon or whether it's a poem or a short story or whatever I'm writing, it's always starting with a question. And the question is usually the most interesting thing.
Yeah. Great. So you want to share some of your poems with us?
Sure, I'd be honored. I was thinking, we were talking about snow earlier, so maybe I'll start with a poem. No.
Terry, he has 20 snow poems, so that'll be the whole show. So
Let me just interrupt. I'm sorry. Irene seems to be wanting to get in, but cannot. I'm not sure what's going. Maybe she's that call-in user there.
yeah, I think she is.
No, that's Donna. That's Donna there. So I'm not sure. Maybe
So I don't see Irene. There's nobody
No?
in.
Oh, yes.
our
Hello.
waiting room.
Sorry. I should have introduced myself. I'm not a secret caller. I'm sorry. I'm here to hear Rabbi Alex.
Yeah, I'm
I'm sorry if I should have introduced myself. I'm sorry.
I shouldn't have taken up the time, but Irene texted me and said she can't get in, whatever that means. Okay,
There-
go
She's
ahead,
not in the
Rabbi.
waiting room. Perry, please feel free to message me so the program can continue.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we can send her the link. It should hopefully work.
Yeah.
Maybe David's there to help her. Perry and Ganilla and Irene and I were part of a poetry group especially during the pandemic. So this is a poem I wrote in Buffalo, probably not too long after I got here in 2008. It's called First Snow. Before the snow, the sky is the only thing white. A dark shadow descends like a giant bird. Surveying the landscape, she nods, a twinkle in her eye. Through her body, stars bright falling, spreading like an avalanche until there is nothing not white, not even the snow. I want to share, I think with inquiry, the pandemic really brought out a lot. And these are poems that I composed a lot of these with Perry and Irene and Ganella. And this first one, a lot of times I was writing while I was walking the dog. If you remember during the pandemic, we really couldn't see a lot of people. So the fact that, and here's a picture of my dogs, the fact that we could go out on a walk, it was so invigorating. And I think a lot of poetry, and also there was the contrast, seeing people and then trying to negotiate that when you're outside, especially early on in the pandemic. This one is called From the Perspective of the Tree. I tried to take poems today that had some questions in it. Trees do talk, but what are they saying? I scan the sparse outcrop lining our street. Which one should I consult? Is that tree middle-aged or just fat? The oak that forks in the center seems promising. The roots of an elm clench like a person flexing. This small sapling has bent arms to avoid the electrical wires. Looking up, I notice this is not a tree at all, but a signal booth. Do any of them have the faintest idea what exists before this cul-de-sac? The soil is rich in bog. I fantasize about renting an armchair, relaxing in the plot that will one day become a house, my house. Here, before a Japanese maple was even a thing, I will plant a forest. The trees in my forest will actually bisect one another, competing for sunlight. No humans or their descendants allowed. And this is another one during the pandemic. During a virtual meeting, someone showed a picture of, I think it was a bluebird singing during a storm. And I thought, well, I never really thought about the animals during the storm. What do they do? It's called bird song. I never thought of the plight of the birds in a storm, always afraid for my own safety. Will the walls of my house hold? Will the electricity go out? Will the dogs ever stop their insufferable cries? My heart pulsates just a little stronger as I hold tight to you, our tall pines bending back and forth outside our window. I fear for them as well, but what about the creatures who make their homes in their limbs? Who will protect them? Do the squirrels simply scurry underground? And what about the starlings? Is their sweet song stifled, or does it grow louder? Rising with the gales, screaming out to the world, all will be okay. And I'm going to read one more. This is called The Line, and it was really about all the just changes that kept happening. Every single time you thought that you knew what you were doing, it changed. The line I drew with pen and ruler, careful not to smudge the edges, perfectly straight without indentation or abbreviation, exactly as I had intended, until closer inspection revealed a minute break, an upturn and a downturn, a slight wave missed at first, but clearly present. So I erased and started over. This time, no mistakes, perfect. A line no one could cross, not even I, my resolve too strong, impenetrable. But even as I contemplated the process, brought pen and ruler to paper, I realized there was no point. All lines are just collections of dots, none strong enough to withstand the frailty of the human heart.
Nice, very nice. So Alice, we're doing something. Irene just showed up. So we're doing something a little different this year. We have the couple of breaks during the program where the audience can make comments, ask you questions. So, we like to encourage a little more interaction. So As I say, don't let the poet off easy. We'll put the hot lights on him so he starts to sweat. I don't know if you can really sweat in Buffalo at this time of year, but Alex, we'll try to raise the temperature. Look at Perry. Perry's going, okay, what can I ask him now? What can I ask him? Holly, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking, since I don't live around snow anymore, but have for most of my life, how absorbent it is of sound, how it kind of just takes things in, and it's like insubstantial, and yet it's almost like a blanket. And so I was wondering to you if you could just speak. I mean, I hear it in the poems, but in prose, like, say, what does snow do for you as a poet?
Well, snow transforms the landscape. And one of the joys, we were talking to John, he had 23 hours straight of snow. We've had winters here where it snowed every day for a month or two, and that's lake effect snow. So sometimes it's very light, it's very pretty, but the lawn is clean, the street is clean. It was a very strange experience during the last blizzard that we just had in December, that our street wasn't plowed. And that had never happened in Buffalo. It didn't get plowed for 5 or 6 days. And walking out, especially with our dogs, through the landscape, it just felt like we were on the moon. So I think that there is something beautiful. And I would contrast that. I lived in New York City for a while. And in New York City, the snow gets very dirty very quickly. I'm sure in most cities it's like that. So you're within like a day, you don't want to see it because it's just so gross. But when there's continual snow, like every day, it's like you get a clean slate. It's very beautiful. There's a lot of, I guess I could write a book of only snow poetry.
Yeah, and Holly here yesterday, because we had that very long snowstorm. I think the blanket effect is there are really no sounds outside unless there's a snowplow. I mean, the trees may rustle, there might be a little bit of wind. There is no other sound. There's no cars on the highway, there's no people on the street. And to me, I don't know, when it snows, it's like a sedative. It's calming. I'm like, it's snowing. Of course, if it snowed every day for 2 months, I don't know if I'd feel that way, but we hadn't had snow really all year. So yesterday was the big one finally for the coast, mid-coast Maine, where we are. The rest of Maine's gotten a lot, but so no, that's great. That's great, Alex. That was good talking about the difference between New York City and Buffalo. Anybody else? Perry, Irene, questions, comments?
Rabbi, I admire your work so much. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your process of composing. I know we've talked about a title, question, idea, or first, or does this change all the time, and do you revise? Because I'm a revising addict.
Well, first of all, Perry, it means a lot coming from you. I really can't think highly enough about your work. I'd say in general, I revise a little bit. I think editing is really important when it comes to writing. But generally, it'll start with a line or a thought and then I'll build it from there to try to reach some kind of resolution. And I think, I take your suggestions, take out the ands, things like that. But in general, I feel for me, that I've learned over the years that my writing is the sharpest when it's kind of just contained, when I know the inspiration, and the inspiration can come at any time. So I think with my poetry, There'll be times where I write a lot, and there'll be times where I don't write at all. It really depends, because when the inspiration happens. I think when things are just too normal, then I don't find a lot of poetry.
It's pretty good. Things are too normal. I like that. That's gonna go in the next poem.
Yeah. I feel like it's the contrast in life, and when you're just kind of going through your
Well,
life.
sure.
I think.
No, Perry, I
Yeah.
call it the new abnormal. There is no new. I remember when early in the pandemic, what's the new normal going to be like? What's it going to be like? And the whole thing is, it's really the new abnormal. There's no normal anymore. I don't know. I guess the air we breathe, and there are still lakes and rivers, and people stand upright. But after that, I don't know. So Alex, let's move on. So, just to go back, so basically you said, it starts with a line or a thought. Sometimes that can be a question. But are there times when you just start writing without that prompt, where there's no burning question? You're just sitting down, maybe some things come. I'm just wondering, there are a bunch of people that start writing, it told us, and then the question appears. They're not even thinking about it. And all of a sudden they're writing, they look down the paper and there's the question. So I'm just wondering if you've had that kind of experience versus starting with the question.
Well, I think because we have 3 kids at home, 2 dogs, congregation, and trying to juggle a lot of things, it's hard for me to sit down and just write without an inspiration that comes, So yeah, I think that I admire, I think that getting into the practice of just writing is helpful, and I have done that at different times. But I feel like creativity just comes through us. It's something even beyond us. It's a spiritual thing. So I think sitting down, I'm working on some like novel. I'm trying to put together like young adult novels, and that's, you really have to have a structure to it. I have an idea, and I have the characters, and I have it planned out, but I realize you have to be really planful, and that's harder for me. So I think I set it as a goal. We'll see how it goes. But it's different. I write a lot of songs too. I'm not a musician, and I'm just recently learned how to play the guitar a little bit. But I feel like having something you're working on, and with music in particular, you can always play around with it, whatever I'm doing. It doesn't, it's different than a poem in a way. You just, wherever you are, because you're singing it, you're working out the melody and something like that. But for me, it's very healing to have those kind of things. It helps me.
So just to go back to, I thought you were talking about, there was a spiritual part of your creativity, if I got that right. I guess I'd call it, divine inspiration. How does is that kind of the guiding light for some of you? I'm just wondering. Because I think part of it is I'm a big believer that there's another entity, or there's something else that's walking along the path with me, not just me, or walking around the universe, whatever the analogy is. So I'm just wondering, how does that work? How does that get incorporated? Is it inspire your creativity? Once again, I'm just trying to understand it.
Yeah, I would say that with creativity, you want things to kind of flow through you. And I think it is very spiritual, because you realize this great gift we've been given in life, and a brain and ability to comprehend and ability to be in this world, that the this this kind of this ability to kind of see the world and transpose it in some way is something you're tapping into, something deeper than you. I do think a lot of writers probably say that it's beyond them. It's like the writing just kind of happens when they tap into this spirit. So I think it's definitely it's definitely divine, however you want to classify that.
Yeah, good. Do you want to share some more poems with us?
Sure. So I'm gonna a couple more just from this the poetry while walking dogs. This is a way of inquiry, how I wanted to point out in this poem, and this is a true story, how when we see the world, suddenly it can look different. You realize that you saw the world wrong. And you thought you knew what was happening. Like, so often we mess things up in our head and we find out later. So it has to do with a fox, or what I thought was a fox. It's called The Fox. For some reason, I kept thinking of the fox, the way she stood staring, then ducking behind the tall grass like an apparition. We were passing by at high speeds. The animal's head cocked sideways, a ball of light red fur looking right at us. A fox, I had pointed, sitting by our porch table later, sipping after dinner wine as you gazed distractedly out ahead, focused intently on whatever it was you were thinking. No, a coyote, you finally said. I stopped, unsure of what you meant. Then all at once I knew you were thinking about my comment. Funny how that moment had stayed with us. I looked down at our dog, sprawled out on the grass, relaxing, remembering the way coyotes hunted, feigning injury, drawing dogs in and then devouring their naive cousins. My heart shuddered, thinking back. Had my initial impression been so wrong? Could a coyote be that size? Yes, you replied. The whole day began unraveling. No longer a fox or a coyote, just an unknown animal staring, considering our car as we passed, before ducking into the grass, well past where either of us could see.
Good. I'm not going to venture into your backyard. I think that's what I learned from that poem. Stay out of the backyard and we'll be good.
So since we were talking about God, especially during the pandemic, this was to the Supreme Creator.
Yep.
The wind was ripping through the trees as it tends to where I live. I sat on a hot, dry day below the gentle pines in my backyard, enjoying the energy of it all, knowing that some days I may sit stoic and inconsequential or choose not to rise at all. Still, despite my best efforts, the world will give a vigorous response, tormenting the landscape, destroying my meager garden, or maybe even tossing a few loose shingles. And I, as is my right, can simply allow that energy beyond me to envelop me without the slightest need to even move into the shade. Ultimately be reliant on forces much beyond my own design. I'm somehow comfortable resting, weary, one leg upon another in a fashion my wife tells me is bad for my back, and feeling pride that just a tiny speck of creative matter could be deserving of such immense demonstrations of supreme power and love.
Very nice.
I wanted to read a poem. This was when I was in Israel. I'm going there in a couple of weeks, but I was on a trip, and we saw a burnt cactus. There had been a fire up in the north of Israel. It really captivated me. It's called A Lonely Cactus. The fire burned through the forest, made its way to the youth village, destroying 8 houses, evacuated the prison, toppled a bus trying to rescue the prisoners, killing the passengers. It even burned a cactus, which stood blackened by the side of the road, arms outstretched, staring horrified at the impending disaster. I did not know the forest or the youth village or even the 8 lives lost on the bus. All I knew was the cactus. I watched, crying a little as I passed on the highway. How could this have happened? Where was God? Why was this particular cactus not spared? I could not shake the image from my heart. How much harder it must have been for the families of those who died. Is this what it means to be human, to cry for a cactus? I ask you only to drive by the forest yourself. Find that particular cactus, blackened and lonely. See if it too pierces your soul, or if it is only a proxy for all things built up and burned down out of human control.
Really nice.
And let's see. I wanted to read a couple of other ones. Well, one, maybe, I think I only had time for one more, right? So this is one I wrote a long time ago.
No, we got plenty of time.
Okay, so I'll read a couple. So this is from a collection, Wildflowers and Fireflies. It's poetry taken from my life. When I was young, in my 20s, you feel like you have to, finish something. And this was a response to that. Do not finish me. Do not finish me. Do not allow the world to complete my life like a postage stamp of delight, unable to be removed once applied to the page. Do not finish me, even if polish makes me shine and I could sparkle like light through water. Do not finish me and watch my name be etched with weight of stone and pillars of memory. I want to be fluid, sinking sometimes and unsure, a treasury of incomplete thoughts, always holding fast to a willingness to break what I have, to reestablish a world in the midst of fragments. And this last one is, I worked at a nursing home as a chaplain, and it was about, and this was in my early 20s, this was about seeing an older husband going to take care of his wife who was no longer really able to communicate back. And it was sort of what brings someone to be able to do that. It's called Every Day He Comes. Every day he comes, his wife in a jerry chair, mouth opened, mucus around the sides. She eats, but her eyes are shut every day. I haven't missed 5 days in 3 years, he tells me. I'm the rabbi, people tell me things. He is across the room. I watch his hand glide into her mouth. Upsy daisy, that's right. Her body is curled like a grapevine around the chair. She is ascending. I am amazed at his persistence. What kind of love can make a person come every day to see someone die? If you think I'm nice, she was 100 times nicer, he tells me. I believe him. Looking at their wedding pictures, her round, healthy face, and I know what it is he sees as he scoops the food from her plate into her mouth.
Yeah, really nice. So let's go back to that don't finish me. There was, these are stories out of your life. So at some point, you weren't done yet, or maybe you thought you were getting boxed into something and you were rebelling. Oh, no, don't go there. Don't go. I'm just trying to figure out, where did that end up for you?
Well, I think when I was at that age, until I went to rabbinical school, really, I felt like, my parents said, just go be who you want to be. They didn't put any real pressure on me to decide or think about things. So when I graduated from undergraduate, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I always tell this to people in their early 20s when I'm working with them. And it was the sense of just powerless. You're looking at your life. This is your life. What are you going to make of it? So I think the poem was just, you want this to be fixed. You want me to be fixed. I don't really want to be that way. I want to be fluid, as I said, something that could change, that our life doesn't. I think I was just discovering that at that point. Whatever our career, you said, I wear several hats. I'd say I wear, a half a dozen hats at least, like most of us. And that over the course of our life, we go through many changes. And that's the way it should be.
Right. So you went to Jewish Theological Seminary. Where was that?
That's in New York City. It's a program
Okay.
called List College. It's connected to Columbia. They
Okay.
have a new program, it's called.
Yeah, my daughter went to Andover Newton Theological School, so she's a Unitarian minister and a what do you call it? I'll think of the other word in a minute. Yeah. No, very nice, very nice. So let's take another little Q&A break here. If anybody, Perry or Ganilla or Irene or even Wendy have any questions or comments. I'll ask you one. So there were, so you did have, Wendy said just applause. So Wendy's like, okay. So there was a book that was more of your personal poems. Are you doing more of that, or is that kind of you got that out of your system, you got those, and now you moved on to some different. Obviously, you got the dogs, your personal, and whatever book 3 is. So I'm just wondering if where you go. What's that?
I just, for me, it was helpful. The process of putting together books was very helpful. I'd been writing for many years. My first poem I wrote that's in the personal book, Wildflowers and Fireflies, I wrote in undergraduate, and then kind of started to find my voice from there. I mean, all my poetry is personal. I just kind of wanted to organize it. These were more about events in my life, particularly my young life, and they, extended. So I tried to, for me, my poetry kind of worked. I wrote a lot during the pandemic. I mean, thanks to Irene and Perry and Ganilla for encouraging that, but also the time frame. I always write a lot when I'm traveling, so that was easy to collect. And then I wanted a book kind of all the other poems that mostly had to do with my life. So thematically it worked.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, nice.
Irene, that's a question.
I don't see anybody else here. What, Perry? You're waving your finger.
Irene had a question.
Irene, go ahead.
I was telling her she's muted.
Yeah.
This is our.
There she goes.
Because of your knowledge, I imagine, of Hebrew, has it ever occurred to you to write a poem in Hebrew or to translate a poem of yours that you've written in English into Hebrew?
I've written some poetry and some songs in Hebrew. Even after, I don't know, 10 years of Hebrew, it's different. Language is like, I have a very deep knowledge of it, but wouldn't say I have the fluency to really trust that. I think that my greatest inspiration as a poet is Yehuda Amichai, who was the Nobel laureate from Israel, poet laureate from Israel. And he was a wonderful poet. He died, I think, in the 90s. His style, I just always admired. He really used Hebrew, because Hebrew being an ancient language and that we still have continuity from biblical works to today, he would often, bridge the gap using the Hebrew. Hebrew is a wonderful language in that way, because the texts are always in conversation. And so whatever word it is, even though in English we do that, of course, but you're going back maybe to Shakespeare or Chaucer at most. In Hebrew, you're really going back 3,000 years often between the way things are used, and language changes so much. And that is the practice of the rabbis. When Jews look at our holy text, we see all the words connected between, and it's a little, a lot of the inventions that they had in terms of how to think about writing and expressing ourselves is a little like the computer age, like when you click on something, a hyperlink on the computer. That's a little how the rabbis thought about it. They would always have hyperlinks underneath every word, and it would connect between multiple texts. And that's really how they saw literature. It was very unique because it was before the time of the computer, where we could really be able to do that widespread, but that's how they understood things.
Well, yes, texts do speak to one another. There's so many layers. I wonder what you think of prayer books in temple, and I'm sure in churches too. I mean, the prayers are so very poetic. The cadence, the words, the conciseness, the praise, the everything. I mean, what do you think about the correlation between prayer and poetry?
Well, Jewish prayer is a little different than Christian prayer. When you go to a Christian service, you'll have a hymnal usually, or something that will have written out songs. That, of course, is poetry as well. But the Psalms, which are ancient poems, and some of the most celebrated poems that have ever been written, I think that a lot, the way that we look at what we call the Siddur, which is the prayer book, it is a collection of thousands of years of important writings. It was all the best stuff of all the best writers that they had, or that their favorite ones, and they made it into the collection. But the problem is, because the prayer book and our religion is so old, sometimes it gets really long. And so part of the debate between, let's say, liberal and Orthodox Judaism is, are we allowed to edit some of these and add some new ones? At a certain point, they realized the collection was getting too deep. But I think that it is beautiful poetry, and sometimes it's not as accessible because of the age between when it was written and today. But you can always find a way to pull out the meaning in it.
Great. Want to share a few more poems with us?
Sure. Be happy to. So I'll share some more travel poems. This actually, Israel, as you know, has had a lot of different wars and attacks, and unfortunately, I've lost a number of friends through bombings. This was back in 2002. There were several friends that were eating at a cafe at Hebrew University, and someone came in and bombed the cafe. So I was in the States at the time, actually in New England, near you. I think I was in Maine or New Hampshire, one of those states, at a camp kind of program. And this was, I call it an answer to Amichai. He wrote a poem about the diameter of a bomb. And this is about the diameter of kindness. The diameter of kindness extended much beyond that of the bomb, like the easy glide of a blue whale in the waters of the Atlantic, filtering plankton like friends in its large belly, or the soft fur of two baboons grooming one another, So goes the hand gripping tight to hold me up, or the man with the pointed signbirds who gave an old lady a seat on the Egged bus. The bomb detonated and stopped, leaving trails of grief and terror, shaking as big and boastful as the clockworked Earth's plates, or the red marks left behind after a firm back rub. But while the bomber's memory quickly disintegrated into dust, the old smiles of his victims leapfrogged one person at a time until they caught the world in butterflies and sad, mysterious dreams. They were wonderful people, Marla and Ben Bluestein, just wonderful. Right after rabbinical school, I went to Thailand for just a couple of weeks. I had some extra air miles, and so I went to Taiwan and Thailand. In Thailand, I decided to learn scuba diving, and there was an Israeli there that was teaching us in the south of Thailand. So this is called the Israeli Diver. He went to Sharm el-Sheikh to escape the army. In the clear waters of the Red Sea, he saw fish as big as tanks, whale sharks and blue spotted stingrays, quiet and shy, avoiding his bubbles. They swam without checkpoints or borders, in a land that could not be fought over or assigned any definite weight. He remained there on the bottom long after the suggested no decompression limit, waiting for the world to become like the reefs, or the reefs to become like the world, in which case he would rise until his lungs filled to capacity, leaving him unable to breathe in new air. And I'll read one other from that time. It's very moving. I'm a terrible swimmer, so learning to scuba dive was pretty difficult, actually. Debris. How many wrecks lie at the bottom of the ocean? Hulls broken, rusting. Wood from the ancient world spread out, decaying splinters, parse like tendrils. Fish and plankton creating playgrounds of aquatic life. How many wrecks lie on the surface of the earth? Survivors screaming, they continue to. The wreckage is smaller, bonier. Lives never started in the way they were intended. Debris from each, when collected, as big as a ship. We walk by them, over them, pretending they do not exist. Occasionally, we will see one walking. Perhaps pity will come. Perhaps nothing, not even our hearts, racing, looking for a rope to pull them in.
Very nice.
So you tell me, I have some more?
Yeah, just one or two more, and then we're going to check out today.
Okay. It's been a lot of fun being with you today.
No, it's great. Great to see you again. And yeah, I feel like, Perry, did I get my honorary Buffalo poetry card or something? I think I've got that. It's coming in the mail or something.
At least you didn't bring up football, because I would have gotten really mad. So
No, I did before you got on. I knew you might.
okay. I'm done. I'm done. No more.
No, I'll just tell you this. I was shocked. The snow, the snow during the game was like, yeah. Hey, listen, it's all played out on the field. Doesn't matter what you talk about in the papers. You gotta, yeah, we'll see. No, it's
Yeah,
listen.
sports is a struggle. It's an emotional struggle. It's a journey, and it's very hard. You're competing against the best in the world, right?
No, there's a lot of slippage on the field. You didn't have good foot, whatever you want to call it. It was very tough to, maintain position, start and stop. So part of it was those games to me are very, very challenging. And all your well laid out plans kind of evaporate due to the condition of the field. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But
All
Perry,
right.
you know what the Red Sox say? There's always next year.
Yeah, it's a little like the Red Sox, but Cincinnati has not won either, so
Yeah.
they're struggling as well.
Yeah.
Mm.
This is, I spent some time in Bangkok, and when you see they had all these pictures at the visa office of different travelers. The visa office in Bangkok. The wall of passport photos outside the visa office holds so many stories. Snapshots of lives about to head off to destinations: Laos, Cambodia, Indonesia, Japan. We stare at each, barely catching smiles. Hundreds of them waiting to be handed off to border controls. Guards with nasty expressions, questions about where are you staying? Lined up one by one, they themselves make a picture. A girl leaving home for the first time. Her face is rosy as candy. The older ones, picture fading in the center, black and white print. They are meant to disappear. We laugh at the man with the big hair, his tattoo visible. A woman with bloodshot eyes. Another close-up, barely fitting in the picture. We are like them, life imitating art, art life. What would our expressions be? What face would we hold for future travelers? Outside, the noise of Khao San Road is barely audible. Soon we will disappear into the streets. Soon we too will fade like a picture into the humid night, summer night, sorry. Butchered the end there, sorry about that.
That's all right. That's all right.
And one more.
Yeah, one more, we'll close it out.
This is called Freedom. By the big Buddha in Bangkok, we set the birds free. I did it because I felt sorry for them, not for the luck. One small bird would not fly. He sat in the dry, brittle grass, fidgeting. You went to see what was wrong. I was skeptical. I thought the birds were trained to go back to the old woman who sold us the cage. For you, it didn't matter. Life was upon us, and you had to take joy in it. Your smile as big as Buddha's gold. Later on the bus over to Siem Reap with the driver honking at peasants, I thought of the bird and was happy we set them free, even if they had just returned to the cage, even if a few small birds would never fly away at all.
Very nice hour. Thank you for sharing and for, bringing all sorts of different perspectives to the hour today. It was great. So
Thank you, John. Thank you for leading this, and Wendy, I appreciate the time. And I think it's so important. There aren't a lot of venues for poets. So just to be able to have that is really important, even in the virtual world. We see how important it is.
well,
It was a beautiful offering, and I would be interested if there's going to be another one, if I could know about it.
It's every week, Donna.
Every week.
Every week? This is the first I ever heard about it. When is it on the week?
Tuesday at 12 o'clock.
noon.
Oh,
Donna, why don't I talk to you afterwards, okay?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, anyway, thank you.
And Alex, I love the at 72 and a half, I'm going to use don't finish me as my new mantra. Wendy, 72 down and I don't know, 28 to go. I'm
At least.
God willing, in health. We
yeah,
say,
yeah. Don't.
Moses lived to 120, and they used to say until 120, but that seems a little too old. So we usually say until 100, like 20.
Yeah. Well, that nun just died who was like 118 or 119. I don't know. I don't even know how your limbs work at 119.
We have a lot of people living into their hundreds that are living independently still, but it's a lot of luck too.
Yeah.
Well,
good.
I just want to thank all of you very much for joining us today, and hope to see many of you next week. Alex, your work is wonderful, and we're most grateful.